Welcome to Off-Duty Engineer. I am Alan. This channel is for some of my scale modeling projects, plastic aircraft, wooden ships, and dioramas to display them. This is a summary scale model build of the two aircraft, the Mirage III C and the Cheetah D Fighter Aircraft, both finished off as operational in the South African Air Force colours. The kits are both kinetic models in 1/48 scale. In part 1, the build of the two aircraft was covered. In this part 2, they are combined into a diorama of them landing side by side with their drag chutes open. First, here are the photos of the final result. Both fighter aircraft are in the South African Air Force SAAF insignia. The Mirage III C is in the older SAAF colours, 1960 to 1980. The newer Cheetah is in the newer but still interim insignia circa 1980 to 1997. The new insignia came into effect in 1997 to current. I served in the South African Air Force in the mid-70s and stayed in contact with the developments for many years. I was familiar with the Mirage III C in all versions and with the Cheetah Fighter that was developed from the Mirage III C frames. Here are a few images that was the inspiration and stirred up the motivation for the diorama. I was an officer in the radar division of the SAAF, and we trained together with the fighter pilots with a very close relationship between all. Radar was the lifeline to the pilots. We at Radar shared the missions briefings, directed them outwards, kept their tail clear of bogies, checked their fuel, distance, direction, attack and then home vectors. It was always a magic moment when the fighter plane landed back at base. This usually chalked up a successful mission and a safe return after hours of intense involvement and concentration. I visioned a successful landing displayed in a diorama. Next is the building of the diorama. First is the preparation of the drag chutes. The first challenge was to work out how to make the drag chutes. I could not find any source online, so I was on my own here. I estimated dimensions, scale to be about 50mm diameter, the material had to be thin cloth and the lines out of cotton. I started with a paper template of the material for the chute and found some calico cloth. Calico was loose weave and would show the texture. Next, a method was needed to hold the cotton across the cloth, extended out to more than 400mm in each of the 4 directions. I used modelling wood and cut slots at 5mm intervals to guide the cotton. A lot of flat space would be needed to lay out the cotton and cloth. The cotton length would need to be 1 meter total from aircraft around the chute and back to the aircraft. The kitchen counter was large enough for this if I went diagonal. The wooden guides were used at the ends and the chute cloth was raised so that the cotton would lay onto the cloth. Wax paper under the cloth to prevent adhesion in preparation for the acrylic glue to follow. Next was to secure the cotton to the cloth. A water-based acrylic glue like wood sealer or diluted wood glue was used. Good so far. Next was to shape the chute. I used a soft plastic ball of 50mm diameter. The ball was wrapped in a cloth and covered with food wrap to prevent glue adhesion. I used a vase for height to be able to pull the cotton downwards to wrap the cloth and cotton around the ball. Hold the cotton with a few elastic bands around the base of the vase. Need to wet the cloth to allow it to conform to the round ball. Not too wet, I do not want to loosen the cotton off the cloth from the previous step. Then use undiluted wood glue to lock in the cloth and cotton to the shape of the ball. Repeat all for the second chute. I figured the chutes would need some support in the diorama to keep them open and in shape. The rubber ball that I had used was almost clear and transparent, so I cut the rubber ball into halves in preparation to be used. I procured some clear perspex rods of different diameters from eBay. A 4mm diameter, 400mm length rod would be ideal to have between the back of the chute and the tail of the aeroplane. I prepped this for each chute. I marked and trimmed 2/4 out of the ball, where the side would be towards the viewer to try and hide the ball a little more. Completion of the chute was to fit the ball and fit the 400mm clear rod, holding all in a vise. Then bring the cotton lines to the clear rod, use a slip of tube and CA glue to fix the lines halfway at the convergence point, and again at the end where they link to the aircraft. I drilled and fitted a 1mm diameter brass rod into the aircraft end of the rod. Now the whole diorama layout could be tested and the size determined. These are 1/48 scale airplanes, over 300mm long, with a 400mm drag chute behind. The airplanes are 200mm wide each, and they would be landing alongside each other. The base would need to be 700mm long by 400mm wide. Next, prep the diorama base. I spent some time finding and editing images for the diorama. The base would need to be a runway, showing white lanes and markings and tire marks from use, and it would have to be out of focus blur to show movement. I decided to use an image rather than to try and create this with an airbrush. Here is the original image and the final image after a lot of editing. I decided to add a vertical back to the diorama about 170mm high. The image here would need to include a cheetah at full pace run in crisp focus, and a background of the African savanna grass in full blur, and this needed an African acacia tree faded in the background. After liaison with the printers, snap print nearby, I chose 180g poster paper and a matte finish. The images were custom and oversized to normal, so it took a few days and some cash. Here they are back. Now I could finalize the diorama size and fit the actual print sizes. A new XPS blue foam board was procured from the local hardware shop, 1.2 meters long, 600mm wide, 30mm thick. The edges would have 3mm wood edging for protection. The two pieces of foam were cut out of this, allowing for the overlap at the back and the 3mm edging. Overall size was planned, base 700 by 400mm for the image size. The back is also 700mm wide and 170mm high for the image. Acrylic Gorilla Glue is used on the XPS. Contact adhesive will melt the foam, I speak from experience. Clamp to a square on the desk and dry overnight. I did use 3 long screws in the overlap, Gorilla Glued in for additional strength. The result was good so far, very rigid. The 3mm edging was cut and glued next. Gorilla Glue again, but wood glue would have also worked here. It was left overnight to dry. The edges were filled and then sanded. Not much fill was needed because this was new XPS board. The thin gap along the edge needed smoothing off for the final image adhesion. The XPS is 30mm thick, but the wood edging is only 25mm. A chamfer of 5x5mm underneath was sanded to make the board appear thinner to the 25mm. Test and fit the images. Check the final arrangement. All on track. Next was to paint the base. This would make the foam a bit more robust for handling and smooth for the image adhesion, and just look good. This time I painted the back and underneath of the diorama as well. Previous dioramas I did not do this. This is much better. 2 coats of primer were needed. Top coat was a neutral grey. Double-sided sticky tape was run on the edges of the panels and at 50mm intervals on the panels. The paper was then carefully laid onto the panels and pressed down with a cloth. The edges trimmed with a sharp knife where needed. I had less than a millimeter to trim off one edge. The last task was to fit the aircraft and the chutes. The clear rods from the 2 aircraft were pressed through the image card into the foam base at the correct angle. The aircraft are to have the main wheels on the ground and the front wheels a little bit off the ground. I positioned the one aircraft slightly ahead of the other to break the symmetry a bit. The chutes were kept off the ground with a 4mm clear vertical rod at the chute. Looks okay. Here is a summary and some more photos of the completed Cheetah and Mirage on the diorama. This was a very satisfying build. It took about 6 to 8 weeks for the airplanes and about 3 weeks for the diorama. The time spread out over a few months. The Kinetic kits are quite new. All parts fitted well. I found that the Kinetic kits are good quality and would recommend them. The aircraft build is in part 1. The diorama was satisfying and rewarding to plan and create. Here is a spoiler for the next models planned. In my stash, I collect mainly South African aircraft and armour from the 70s era. I was in the South African Air Force in the mid-70s. The next model is probably a C-130 Hercules aircraft. I have a 1/48 scale of that one, so it is going to be huge. I will finish it off in SAAF colours from the 70s. This will not be in a diorama, it will be displayed standalone, all doors open, maybe a few ground staff figures. I was transported by these a few times. Another planned model is the ubiquitous G6 Rhino. This is a 150mm howitzer on a 6-wheel base. It was developed by the South African Defence Force to replace the Centurion tank that did not perform well in the desert sand in northern Namibia. I plan to diorama 2 of these, one clean and ready to go, and the other one just back from battle, scarred and in need of attention. Please keep a lookout on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn for the post. Thank you. That is all. I hope that you enjoyed this. Please follow, like, subscribe, etc. See you next time. Thank you.